The first time I realized someone was stealing my deliveries, I thought I was losing my mind. Packages would vanish from my porch before I even got the delivery photo. Not all of them, just the expensive ones. A power drill I'd ordered for my workshop, gone. A set of Bluetooth security cameras, gone. A $300 set of mechanical tools, gone. Yet, the $12 gardening gloves or the box of dishwasher pods always arrived safe and sound. It felt surgical, like whoever was doing this knew exactly what to take. I live in one of those cookie-cutter suburban developments where everything looks the same, identical mailboxes, manicured lawns, and people who smile at you just long enough to confirm you're not a stranger. My next-door neighbor, Karen, was the self-appointed queen of the street. She wasn't officially in charge of anything, but that never stopped her from behaving like she owned every square inch of the neighborhood. Her husband, Frank, was the quiet type, gray hair slicked back, golf shirts tucked into khakis, always lugging something heavy for Karen while she barked orders like a general. When the first package disappeared, I chalked it up to porch pirate. Amazon refunded me, no big deal. When the second went missing, I filed a police report. The officer was sympathetic but not optimistic. "These things happen," he said, handing me a printout of home security tips. "Get a camera. People don't mess with houses that have cameras." So I did exactly that, ironically, right before my new camera system got stolen too. That's when I knew I was dealing with someone local. Someone who could see the boxes land before I did. I started keeping watch. My job allows me to work from home, and my office window faces the street. It didn't take long to notice a pattern. Every time a delivery van stopped near my driveway, Karen's blinds twitched. Sometimes, a few minutes later, Frank would wander outside under the pretense of checking the mailbox or taking out the trash. He'd linger by the curb, glance up and down the street, and shuffle back inside. I couldn't prove anything, but my gut told me I was being watched. I mentioned it casually to Karen one afternoon while she was pruning her hydrangeas. "Hey, weird question," I said. "You haven't seen anyone around my porch lately, have you? Couple of my deliveries disappeared." Her lips tightened just enough to flash a hint of satisfaction before she covered it with a sympathetic smile. "Oh, that's awful," she said. "People will steal anything these days. Maybe you should have them sent to a locker instead. Or have them left at my place. Our porch is covered, less visible." "Appreciate the offer," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I'll handle it." Her expression flickered. Just for a second, it looked like I'd snatched away something she wanted. Then she turned back to her plans. "I'm not impulsive by nature. I don't shout. I don't confront. But I do plan. And when I plan, I make sure the ending is worth the wait." So I ordered something deliberately tempting, a new cordless drill set, the same model that had vanished before. I set up a decoy box inside the packaging, filled it with the most glorious payload imaginable, industrial glitter powder mixed with a dye that sticks to skin for days. I rigged a small spring-loaded mechanism under the lid. Nothing dangerous, just messy. When opened, it would detonate a shower of glitter and fluorescent pigment straight upward. I placed the package on the porch, checked the live camera feed, and waited. For 2 hours, nothing. A breeze rattled the leaves, a kid biked past, a dog barked somewhere down the block. Then I saw Frank step outside. He looked around like a man stretching after a nap, then made his way toward the curb. A second later, Karen emerged, waving at someone down the street. Perfect cover. Frank lingered by the hedges for a moment, pretending to tie his shoe. When he straightened up, he glanced toward my porch. My heart rate spiked as he shuffled casually closer. I could almost hear the faint creak of the delivery box being lifted. He didn't even look guilty. He just walked away like it belonged to him. I stayed silent, let him go, watched him disappear inside his house with my drill. Then I waited. 5 minutes later, a muffled pop echoed faintly from the direction of their garage. I swear, it was the most satisfying sound I've ever heard. 30 seconds after that, their side door flew open. Frank stumbled out coughing, drenched head to toe in a haze of gold and pink sparkles. His hair glistened under the sunlight like a disco ball. His arms were streaked with neon pigment, and every step he took sent another cloud of glitter into the air. Karen screamed. Not in pain, more like outrage. What did you do, Frank? There was. He sputtered, blinking as a puff of glitter blew into his eyes. It exploded. I leaned on my window sill and took a sip of coffee, savoring every second. Karen spotted me watching and immediately pointed. You did this, she shrieked, her voice slicing through the quiet afternoon. You set a trap. I opened the window. Oh, you mean my stolen package? The one your husband just exploded in your garage. That's entrapment, she snapped. You can't trick people like that. You can't steal people's stuff like that either, I said and closed the window. For the next hour, I watched them try to clean it up. The glitter had worked beautifully. It clung to their driveway, the garage door, even Karen's hair when she tried to help. At one point, she started spraying water, which only made it spread further. The dye mixed with the runoff and stained the concrete a shimmering pink. By evening, they'd given up. The garage door was now a permanent art installation of humiliation. I almost felt bad. Almost. The next day, I expected silence, maybe even avoidance. Instead, Karen showed up at my door wearing sunglasses in fury. She demanded I pay for damages. I told her to call the cops. She did. When the officer arrived, he could barely keep a straight face. He listened patiently while Karen explained how I'd laced a package with glitter and caused property defacement. Then he asked one question. So the package wasn't yours? Karen froze. Frank mumbled something about a mix-up. The officer turned to me, clearly amused. You want to press charges? I smiled. Not yet. He nodded. Then I'd recommend they stay off your property. After they left, I thought that was the end. But I underestimated Karen. She wasn't the type to take humiliation quietly. That glitter had done more than stain her driveway, it had wounded her pride. And nothing is more dangerous than an entitled neighbor with a bruised ego and too much time on her hands. 2 days later, strange things started happening again. My trash can disappeared. My mailbox flag was ripped off. Someone poured a puddle of sticky soda on my front mat. Minor things but deliberate, petty, calculated. And then a new package went missing, but this time the glitter bomb hadn't been inside. It was something much more valuable. Something I actually needed. That's when I realized the game had just begun, and this time, Karen wasn't playing alone. When the next package went missing, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. The first glitter trap had been personal revenge. The second theft made it war. It happened 3 days after the incident. I was expecting a delivery of expensive electrical tools, stuff I genuinely needed to finish a renovation project in my garage. I'd set up new hidden cameras this time, tucked inside a fake porch light and one inside a flower pot aimed squarely at my driveway. The real feed was stored offsite in the cloud, just in case someone decided to smash the cameras again. The package arrived at 1:14 p.m. I watched the live feed, saw the delivery guy drop it off, snap the usual confirmation photo, and drive away. Then, at 1:29 p.m., I watched Frank stroll down his driveway again. Same khakis, same blank expression. He stopped at his mailbox, looked both ways, and then his hand casually reached over the property line to grab my box. No hesitation this time. He just walked back up his driveway holding it like a loaf of bread. I downloaded the footage immediately, labeled it, and sat there wondering just how far they'd go. I could have called the cops right then, but something in me wanted to see what they'd do next. When people think they've gotten away with something, they get sloppy. And when they get sloppy, they get caught in spectacular fashion. Around 5 that evening, Karen strutted out to her mailbox. She was wearing one of her usual pastel cardigans and holding a phone like it was a weapon. I could practically feel her glare from across the yard. When our eyes met, she gave me a tight little smile, somewhere between victory and provocation. Then she turned, pretending to check her mail, but she lingered too long. That's when I decided to twist the knife. The next morning, I printed out a single still frame from my camera footage. Frank, in perfect clarity, caught red-handed carrying my box. I slid it into an envelope and left it in their mailbox with a note that said, "You forgot to wave." I didn't even sign it. By evening, they were furious. I could hear them arguing through the thin air between our houses, Karen's voice sharp, Frank's low and defensive. I wasn't close enough to hear words, but I didn't need to. The rhythm was universal: accusation, denial, anger, guilt. The next day, Frank avoided me completely. Karen didn't. She waited until I was out trimming the hedges before walking over like a storm cloud in designer sneakers. "You think this is funny?" she asked. Her voice trembled, not with fear but with that special brand of righteous indignation only certain people can summon. "Leaving things in people's mailboxes? That's a federal offense, you know." I leaned on my trimmer. "So is mail theft. You want to compare notes?" Her face tightened. "We didn't take anything from you." "Then I guess you'll have no problem if I turn over the footage to the police." She froze, just a fraction of a second too long. "You're making a mistake," she finally said. "We're part of the HOA Enforcement Committee. We have every right to inspect what comes into this neighborhood." I couldn't help but laugh. "Pretty sure the HOA doesn't grant search warrants." Karen's jaw clenched. "You'll regret mocking us," she said, before spinning on her heel and storming back to her house. That should have been the end of it. But I've lived here long enough to know Karen's version of "done" usually means escalate until someone cries. By that weekend, the petty nonsense ramped up again. Someone started leaving anonymous HOA notices taped to my door about imaginary violations like inconsistent grass height and improper waste bin placement. One note even warned about suspicious activity involving chemical storage. I nearly laughed out loud. My chemical storage was literally paint cans from Home Depot. But they weren't just playing the paper game. One night, I came home to find that someone had taken a box cutter to one of my car tires. Not enough to deflate it, but enough to cause a slow leak. It was surgical, like they wanted me to notice, not to crash. That was the moment I stopped finding it funny. I'd let them play stupid games, but now they were playing dangerous ones. So I started planning my next move. Step 1. Gather undeniable evidence. Step 2. Bait them into making it public. Step 3. Humiliate them with their own arrogance. I ordered another decoy package, this time containing a motion sensor linked to a high-pitched siren and flashing strobe light. Nothing illegal, just enough to scare the soul out of anyone who touched it. I placed it on the porch late Sunday morning, right after church time, when I knew they'd be coming home. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, their SUV rolled up the driveway. Karen got out first, chatting animatedly on her phone, wearing sunglasses the size of dinner plates. Frank followed, looking worn out, probably still cleaning glitter from his ears. As soon as they pulled into their garage, the motion sensor on my decoy activated. I saw Frank freeze. Then, just like clockwork, he drifted toward my porch, glancing around. He picked up the package. The moment he did, the siren blared, a screaming, shrieking alarm that echoed across the whole block. Frank yelped and dropped the box like it was radioactive. Karen screamed from the driveway, and a few neighbors peeked out their doors to see what was going on. Frank stumbled backward, waving his hands as if he could shoo away the sound. I stepped outside just in time to see him retreat in pure panic. "Everything okay there, Frank?" I asked, smiling. He muttered something and hurried inside. The siren automatically shut off after a minute, but the damage was done. Half the neighborhood had seen it. By the next morning, everyone was whispering about the delivery thief alarm that went off at the Jacksons' house. For a few blissful days, peace returned. No more stolen packages. No more vandalism. I thought maybe they'd finally learned their lesson. But Karen doesn't back down, she recalculates. That Thursday, I came home to find a certified letter taped to my door. It was from the HOA. According to them, I was being fined for causing a public disturbance with unapproved alarm systems and creating unsafe conditions for neighborhood pets. I read it twice, then laughed out loud. It had Karen written all over it, literally. Her signature was at the bottom in fancy cursive. I didn't pay the fine. Instead, I sent a response directly to the HOA board, attaching all my camera footage, the fake violation notices, and a polite little paragraph explaining that 2 of their members were engaged in theft, vandalism, and harassment. I didn't hear back right away, but I didn't need to, because that weekend something changed. Frank started avoiding eye contact altogether. He no longer went for his morning walk. Karen, on the other hand, doubled down. She started filming me. Every time I stepped outside, watering plants, taking out the trash, checking the mail, she'd stand on her lawn with her phone up, narrating loudly. "This is our neighbor," she'd say, "who's been stalking us and trying to frame us for crimes we didn't commit." She wanted me to snap. But I didn't. I smiled, waved, and said, "Hi, Karen," every single time. The more I stayed calm, the more unhinged she became. I knew her type, control was her drug, and the more she lost it, the harder she tried to claw it back. I didn't realize how far she'd go until Monday morning, when I came outside to find a police cruiser parked in front of my house. The officer stepped out, polite but cautious. "Sir, we received a report that you've been using surveillance equipment to spy on your neighbors." Of course she did. I led him inside, offered him coffee, and showed him everything. The glitter bomb, the theft footage, the fake notices, even the new alarm prank. He took notes, thanked me for my cooperation, and promised to include it all in his report. By the time he left, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I was done playing defense. It was time to turn the neighborhood's favorite gossip queen into her own headline. The police report should have been the end of it. The officer had seen the footage, taken the statements, and promised to handle it quietly. But with people like Karen, quietly doesn't exist. If she wasn't in control of the story, she'd rewrite it until she was. The next morning, I woke up to find a new piece of paper taped to my mailbox, this time printed in color. It was a neighborhood newsletter, something the HOA occasionally circulated about gardening tips and community reminders. Only this issue had a full paragraph about certain residents engaging in dangerous surveillance practices that violate community privacy. No names, of course. But my house was the only one on the street with visible cameras. I could almost hear her smug tone as I read it. Karen had turned gossip into policy. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Because people like her always forget the golden rule of public opinion. Once you make something public, you lose control of it. So I made a small adjustment. I printed 10 copies of a new newsletter that looked almost identical to the official HOA version. Same formatting, same header. But I added my own story to it. This one included a friendly warning to residents about a suspected porch thief in the neighborhood, caught on video wearing khaki pants and a golf shirt. I never used names. I didn't have to. I left one in every mailbox on the street except theirs. By afternoon, you could practically feel the tension ripple through the cul-de-sac. People were whispering in driveways, exchanging looks. A few neighbors even waved at me more warmly than usual. Someone had seen the video. I could tell by the way they smirked when Karen walked past. That evening, Karen's perfect little world started to crack. She stormed out of her house around sunset, phone in hand, voice raised loud enough for the entire block. "Defamation," she was yelling. "Slander. We know it was you." Frank trailed behind her, pink glitter still faintly embedded in his hairline like guilt that refused to wash off. He muttered something, but she ignored him. She pointed at me, shouting, "You've been spreading lies about us. You're going to regret this." I just raised my coffee cup in a silent toast and went back inside. The next morning, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. When I arrived at the clubhouse, the room was already divided. Half the members looked uncomfortable, the other half wore that polite neutrality people put on when they're trying not to take side. Karen sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, papers stacked neatly in front of her. Frank sat next to her like a reluctant accessory. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice sugary but sharp underneath. "We're here to discuss a serious breach of privacy and harassment by one of our residents." I didn't flinch. She wanted me to interrupt. She wanted a scene. I gave her silence. She launched into a dramatic retelling, how I'd weaponized surveillance, how I'd harassed them with glitter bombs, how I'd circulated false newsletters. Each word grew shakier as she went. When she finished, she leaned back, smiling like she'd won a lawsuit. The board president, a quiet man named Howard, adjusted his glasses. "Thank you, Karen. Would the accused resident like to respond?" I stood up, calm and deliberate. "Sure." Then I slid a USB drive across the table. "That's all the footage. Every package theft, every fake notice, every alarm prank. You'll also find copies of the HOA fine letters signed by Mrs. Jackson here, under her own authority. I'd like those added to the record." Karen's face went red. "This is out of context." I held up a hand. "No context needed. The video speaks for itself." The room was dead silent for a moment, except for the faint buzz of the overhead lights. Then someone cleared their throat. Is that really Frank taking a package?" Karen slammed her palm on the table. "It was a misunderstanding." Another board member, a woman named Patricia, frowned. "A misunderstanding that happened multiple times?" Frank opened his mouth, then closed it. His silence said everything. The meeting ended without a resolution. Howard promised to review the evidence, but the damage was done. Karen's credibility was shot. People left the room whispering to each other, glancing her way. She looked small for the first time since I'd known her. But I knew it wouldn't end there. Karen didn't retreat, she regrouped. The next week, the neighborhood Facebook group lit up. Anonymous posts appeared accusing me of harassing elderly residents, tampering with mailboxes, and installing illegal recording devices. The comments section turned into a digital brawl, some defending me, others joining the pile-on. That's when I made my smartest move yet. I didn't respond. Not once. Instead, I uploaded a short, silent clip to the group. Frank, in full color, carrying one of my boxes. No caption. No comment. Just the truth. Within an hour, the post had more reactions than anything else in the group that month. Angry emojis, laughing emojis, popcorn gif. By sunset, someone had screenshotted it and shared it to the town's main page. "Local HOA couple accused of porch piracy," the caption read. It spread fast. Too fast for Karen to contain. That night, I saw her out in her driveway on the phone, pacing, shouting. Frank stood a few feet away, staring at the ground. The glow from her screen lit her face in frantic bursts. I couldn't hear her words, but I knew that tone, the desperate scramble of someone watching their image collapse in real time. The next morning, 2 of her closest allies on the HOA board resigned. A few houses down, one of the older neighbors who used to host her tea parties crossed the street to tell me, "Good for you. About time someone put her in her place." It should have been satisfying. But instead, I felt something unexpected: pity. For all her venom, Karen's entire life revolved around control of her image, her neighbors, her home, her husband. Now, piece by piece, it was slipping away. That pity didn't last long. 3 nights later, someone threw an egg at my window. Not a random teenager's prank. 3 perfect splats in a row, thrown from just beyond my hedge line. I didn't even need to guess who it was. The glitter on my porch the next morning confirmed it. She'd left it like a signature. I reported it. The police came, took photos, and promised to follow up. I doubted they'd bother, but I didn't need them to. I already had the final phase of my plan ready. It was simple: expose her, but let her be the one to deliver the blow. I ordered one last delivery, A large, sealed box marked, "Return Authorization Required." Inside was nothing but a GPS tracker and a folded note that read, "Smile for the cameras." I placed it on my porch in full view, knowing she couldn't resist. Sure enough, around dusk, a familiar shape crept across my lawn. The cameras caught everything: the sneaky approach, the quick glance around, the greedy hands lifting the box. And then, the moment of recognition when she noticed the note. She froze, eyes wide, realizing too late. I waited until she was halfway up her driveway before activating the GPS ping. It wasn't for tracking her, it was for timing. Because 30 seconds later, the police cruiser from earlier rolled onto the street. They'd finally gotten tired of her complaints and had circled back for routine follow-up. Perfect timing. Karen was standing in her driveway, holding the stolen box, when the spotlight hit her. The officer stepped out, blinked, and sighed. "Mrs. Jackson, not again." She tried to explain, waving her hands, stammering something about proof and entrapment. But the officer had already seen the footage I'd sent days earlier. He didn't even need to ask questions. As they spoke, neighbors started trickling out onto their lawns, curious. The porch lights flicked on one by one like a slow, glowing jury. Frank came outside just in time to see his wife being questioned while holding stolen property under a police spotlight. He didn't move to help her. He just watched, shoulders sagging. For the first time, Karen looked truly lost. I stood in my doorway, silent. She saw me, her face flushing with a mix of rage and despair. For once, she didn't say a word. The officer eventually left without handcuffs, but the message was clear. Everyone had seen it. Everyone knew. That night, the neighborhood was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Not a single car door slammed, not a dog barked. It was the silence of social exile, the kind Karen had always used as a weapon, now turned against her. But I knew this wasn't over. Because people like her don't disappear quietly. They explode. The morning after Karen's humiliation under the police spotlight, I thought the air itself felt lighter. The cul-de-sac, once buzzing with gossip and petty politics, had gone silent. People waved politely, but no one lingered in driveways anymore. Conversations that once happened in the open now happened behind curtains. Even the local Facebook group was eerily still. But I knew that silence wasn't peace, it was pressure. The kind that builds before a storm. Karen stopped leaving her house for a few days. Frank took over mowing the lawn, collecting the mail, even walking the dog. He looked smaller every day, like gravity had found him faster than everyone else. By the fourth morning, she reappeared. I saw her through my blinds, hair pulled back, sunglasses on, posture stiff. She stood in her driveway holding her phone like a weapon, scanning my house as if daring me to move. I didn't wave this time. I just turned away. That afternoon, a black sedan with tinted windows parked outside her house. 2 men in suits got out and carried briefcases inside. When they left 20 minutes later, Karen followed them to the door, shaking hands like a politician. Something was brewing. I found out what 2 days later when I received a certified letter. Not from the HOA this time, but from a law office in town. The envelope was thick, heavy with formality. Inside was a cease and desist notice accusing me of harassment, defamation, and unauthorized surveillance. It claimed I'd caused emotional distress and reputational harm to the Jackson family. I laughed when I read it. Then I noticed something. The lawyer's signature at the bottom wasn't from the same firm as the one the HOA used. It was a family lawyer, meaning she'd hired them herself. She wasn't defending her property anymore, she was defending her ego. I sent a polite response through my own attorney, a friend from college who owed me a favor. He drafted a single-page reply. Our client possesses extensive documented evidence of theft, vandalism, and harassment by your client. Proceeding with litigation would result in public release of said evidence. We never heard back. But Karen didn't stop. She just shifted tactics. The following weekend, a community cleanup initiative flyer appeared in everyone's mailbox, everyone's except mine. The event was sponsored by concerned residents and promised to restore dignity and order to the neighborhood. Translation: her latest attempt to rebuild her reputation. I almost admired the persistence. Almost. The day of the event, the cul-de-sac looked like a forced festival. Karen had set up folding tables, a cooler of lemonade, and little name tags for volunteers. She greeted everyone with exaggerated warmth, the kind that smelled of desperation. Frank stood behind her, silent, folding trash bags. I didn't attend. Instead, I sat on my porch with my laptop, pretending to work while watching the charade unfold. Midway through, she finally snapped. A kid from down the street, maybe 12 years old, rode past on his bike and shouted, "Hey glitter lady," before pedaling off laughing. The crowd chuckled, a ripple of nervous amusement. Karen's face went crimson. She dropped her clipboard, turned toward me and screamed, "You think this is funny?" Every head turned. I stayed seated. "You ruined my reputation," she yelled, her voice cracking under the strain. "You're a bully, a liar, a coward. You think everyone's on your side, but they're just waiting for you to slip." Frank reached for her arm. "Karen." She jerked away. "Don't touch me." Then she pointed straight at me. "You're sick. You've been spying on us, setting traps, making videos." "Karen," I said quietly, "you did that to yourself." The silence that followed was deafening. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Karen stood frozen, chest heaving, hands shaking. Her eyes darted between the neighbors, people who'd once clapped for her speeches about community pride. Now they wouldn't meet her gaze. She turned and stormed back into her house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Frank stayed outside for a long moment, staring at the ground, before slowly following her in. The next day, a for sale sign appeared on their lawn. At first, I thought it was over. But houses don't sell overnight, and bitterness doesn't evaporate with a signpost. That evening, I was in the garage fixing a power saw when I heard footsteps on the gravel. I turned off the motor. Nothing. Then a faint shuffle, followed by the sound of something brushing against the side of my car. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out. The beam caught a figure crouched by my fence, Frank. His shirt was stained, his face drawn, eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. He looked like a man unraveling. "Frank," I said evenly, "you shouldn't be here." He flinched like I'd shouted. I just wanted to talk." "Then talk." He rubbed his temples, voice trembling. "She won't stop. She can't. You don't understand what she's like when the blinds are closed." I said nothing. "She's obsessed. It's like she needs someone to fight with. And you," he pointed at me, not in accusation, but in despair. "You became the only thing keeping her from falling apart." The sadness in his tone caught me off guard. For the first time, I saw him not as her accomplice, but as another victim orbiting her gravity. "I tried to make her stop," he continued, voice cracking. "After the glitter thing, after the meeting, I told her to apologize. She said she'd rather die than admit she was wrong. I lowered the flashlight. Then leave." He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "Where would I go? Everything's in her name. The house, the car, even my credit cards. She made sure of it." We stood in silence, the only sound the wind rustling through the hedges. Then he said something that chilled me. "She's planning something," he whispered. "Something stupid. I found her searching your address online. She's not going to let it go." I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. "What kind of something?" He shook his head. "I don't know. But if I were you, I'd keep your cameras running." Then he turned and walked away into the dark. The next day, Karen was gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and Frank was sitting alone on the porch staring at nothing. He didn't wave. That evening, I received a motion alert from one of my cameras. Late, around midnight. When I checked the feed, my stomach dropped. It was Karen. She was dressed in dark clothes, face partly covered, creeping along my front walk with a can of spray paint. She stopped by my garage and began shaking the can. The metallic rattle echoed faintly through the feed. I was about to call the police when the feed cut out. Static. Then black. She'd found the camera. By the time I got outside, she was gone. The next morning, the damage was clear. Across my garage door, in sloppy, furious red paint, she'd written, "Liar." It wasn't artistic. It was raw, desperate, unhinged. The kind of act done not to send a message, but to release pressure. I stood there staring at it for a long time. Then I did something that surprised even me. I didn't call the police. I didn't even clean it. I just left it there. Because I wanted her to see what she'd become. By the end of the week, the real estate listing disappeared from Zillow. The for sale sign came down. Karen wasn't leaving. Not yet. And if Frank's warning was right, the next move wouldn't just be paint or mail theft. It would be something much worse. So I started preparing for the finale. The red spray-painted words stayed on my garage door for a week. Every time I looked at it, I thought about scrubbing it off. But then I'd picture Karen standing there in the dark, breathing hard, shaking that can, convincing herself she was the hero in this story. And I'd leave it. Neighbors noticed. Some avoided the topic. Others asked if I wanted help repainting. I just said, not yet. Because part of me wanted her to see it every day, her own scarlet letter, glowing back at her like a mirror she couldn't escape. Frank mowed the lawn as if nothing had happened. His movements were slower now, robotic. He'd wave occasionally, but his eyes were hollow, like someone surviving out of habit. Karen, meanwhile, stayed invisible. Curtains drawn, no morning walks, no HOA flyers. Silence, but not peace. Then one night, at around 2 in the morning, I heard shouting. At first it was muffled, distant. Then it grew sharper, angrier. I looked through my blinds and saw their front door open. Frank stood in the doorway, yelling back into the house. I couldn't make out words, but the tone said everything. After a minute, he threw something, his car keys, maybe, and stormed out to the driveway. The engine started, then roared away. The next morning, the driveway was still empty. Karen's blinds were shut. By noon, I saw her out front, pacing with her phone, gesturing wildly. I could tell she was trying to look composed, but her movements were erratic. She looked like a politician mid-scandal, smiling for a crowd that wasn't there. Later that day, a different car appeared. A white SUV with the logo of a local security company on the side. 2 men got out and started walking the property with her, pointing at my house every few minutes. I leaned against the window frame, watching. She was installing cameras, aimed at me. I actually laughed. The irony was poetic. But then, something darker settled in. Because when a person like Karen feels cornered, they don't just try to protect themselves. They try to destroy whoever made them feel small. That night, I caught movement on one of my own cameras. Not Karen this time, Frank. He was back, creeping through his backyard with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He looked around nervously, then went inside through the side door. At 11:37 p.m., a single light flicked on in their garage. Then another. For the next 20 minutes, I watched him pacing back and forth, talking to someone out of frame. His gestures were frantic, pleading. And then he sat down on a stool, head in his hands. When the light finally went out, I couldn't shake the feeling that something in that house was about to crack for good. The next morning, my suspicion was confirmed. A new HOA violation notice appeared on my front door. I didn't even need to read it to know it was her. The formatting was wrong, the seal slightly off-center. But I took it anyway, curious. It read, "Resident found to be in repeated violation of community safety policies. Mandatory removal of surveillance systems within 48 hours or subject to legal action." At the bottom, she'd signed it again. Karen Jackson, HOA Enforcement Committee. Except there was no such committee anymore. It had been dissolved after her meltdown. She was just using the old stationery. I decided it was time to end this on my terms. That afternoon, I made a call to a local news station. They'd covered small-town scandals before, and the reporter I spoke to loved a juicy suburban feud. I told her there was a story, an HOA member abusing her position, harassment, theft, defamation, even vandalism, and that I had proof. She asked for footage. I sent it. By evening, she called back. "We're running it tomorrow," she said. "You sure you're okay with your name being public?" "Absolutely," I told her. "Just make sure the footage is clear." The story aired the next day at 6 p.m. It wasn't sensational, it was surgical. "Local HOA couple accused of targeting neighbor," the anchor said as the video rolled. Clips of Frank stealing packages. Karen arguing with police. The glitter bomb aftermath. The fake violation letters. They blurred addresses and faces, but everyone in the neighborhood knew exactly who it was. By 6:30, Karen's house was surrounded by flashing phones. People recording from sidewalks, pretending to walk their dogs while whispering. Someone even shouted, "Smile for the cameras, Karen." The following morning, her yard was littered with news flyers and printouts. The HOA's president dropped off an official statement clearing the association of involvement. They'd voted unanimously to revoke Mrs. Jackson's privileges. Karen didn't come outside for 2 days. Then, early on the third morning, I woke to a pounding sound, hard, frantic. Someone was at my door. I opened it to find Frank. His face was pale, sweaty, eyes red like he hadn't slept in days. "She's gone," he said flatly. "Gone where?" He rubbed his temples. "She took my truck. Packed her things last night. Said she was fixing everything." My stomach sank. "Fixing how?" "She didn't say." He looked like he wanted to collapse. I told him to come inside, but he just shook his head. "You should probably check your cameras," he muttered, then turned and walked away. I ran to my desk and opened the feed. At 2:17 a.m., one of the side cameras caught her headlights sweeping across my fence. She stopped by the curb for a few seconds, door open. Then a small spark, a flicker of light. A match. She'd tried to set something on fire. Fortunately, it hadn't caught. The grass was damp from sprinklers. She'd poured lighter fluid along the fence line and thrown a match, but it fizzled out before it spread. Still, the intent was there. The footage was crystal clear. I called the police again. They sent the same officer from before. He watched the video in silence, jaw tightening. "We'll find her," he said. "This crosses a line." Frank disappeared later that day too. His car was gone by morning. No forwarding address, no goodbye. The house sat dark for weeks, curtains drawn, the kind of stillness that makes even the wind hesitate. I didn't hear from anyone again until a month later, when an envelope arrived in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was taken from a highway shoulder. A burned-out pickup truck, scorched beyond recognition. The police later confirmed what I already suspected. It was Karen's. She'd driven it into a ditch miles away, likely in a panic after realizing her story had gone public. She'd survived, but barely. Hospitalized, facing charges for attempted arson and property destruction. Frank never came back. The house went into foreclosure 6 months later. By then, the graffiti on my garage had faded. I finally repainted it, a clean white, no trace of red left behind. The neighborhood never mentioned her name again. Her old allies in the HOA pretended she'd never existed. People smiled more now, waved more. The air felt lighter again. But sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself glancing at the edge of her old property, half expecting to see her silhouette behind the curtains. Control was her addiction. An addiction doesn't die easily. I thought that was the end of it. Until a year later, when I got another delivery. A small box, no return address. Inside was a single item, one I hadn't seen since the glitter explosion. My old cordless drill set, perfectly cleaned, wrapped in tissue paper. And taped to it was a note. 4 words, written in Karen's unmistakable handwriting. "Miss me yet, neighbor?" When I first saw that note, "Miss me yet, neighbor?" I didn't feel fear. I felt something colder. Recognition. The kind that slides under your skin like an old scar suddenly aching in the rain. The handwriting was hers. Loopy, deliberate, that same passive-aggressive cursive she used on every HOA notice. But the postmark was from 2 states over. The return label was smudged, half-torn. And the package itself was too clean. No dust, no fingerprints, nothing that said, "fresh out of the hospital." Meaning someone helped her. I didn't call the police right away. I just set the drill down on the counter and stared at it for a long time. The same drill she, or Frank, had stolen over a year ago. The same one that started everything. A perfect circle, come full loop. That night, I barely slept. Every small sound, the creak of the fence, the hum of the refrigerator, made my pulse jump. I'd tell myself I was being paranoid, then check the window just in case. My cameras were still up, of course. But watching the feeds felt different now. Before, the footage gave me control. Now it felt like bait. By morning, I decided I couldn't live like that. So I started digging. I called the county records office first. They confirmed Karen's case had been transferred, charges pending, but she'd been released from the hospital months earlier on supervised probation. Her last known address was in another state, but the clerk wouldn't say which. Privacy laws, they said. I called the local police department next. The same officer who'd handled her arson attempt picked up. When I told him about the package, he sighed like he'd been expecting it. "She's out," he said. "Moved in with a relative. We had a note in the file to alert us if she contacted you again." "So what now?" "Mail's hard to trace," he said. "We'll make a report, but unless there's a direct threat, not much else we can do." Of course. I hung up, feeling that familiar cocktail of frustration and grim amusement. Karen had always known how to dance just inside the boundaries of consequence. Still, I wasn't about to let her write the ending. That weekend, I drove 3 hours to the next county over, where the return postmark had originated. Small town, half the size of ours. The post office clerk didn't remember the sender, but when I showed him the handwriting, his expression changed. "Yeah," he said. "I think I've seen that script before. Pretty lady, short hair, big sunglasses. Sent a few packages last month. One to your city, now that I think of it. Did she leave a name?" He shook his head. "Just paid cash." I thanked him, left, and drove around the area for a while. The town was quiet. Wide streets, old brick storefronts, the kind of place that felt like it had stopped aging 20 years ago. I didn't expect to find her. And I didn't. But that wasn't the point. The point was to remind myself she wasn't a ghost. She was still human. Fallible. Somewhere out there, probably still angry enough to mistake obsession for purpose. When I got home, everything felt off. My porch light was flickering. The front gate latch was open. Nothing major, just small enough to make me question whether it had been that way when I left. I checked the footage. Nothing. Every camera showed static from midnight to noon. A glitch or a jam. Either way, it wasn't random. That night, I slept with my phone by my bed and my shoes near the door. At 2:46 a.m., a soft thump woke me. Not loud, not distinct. Just something out of rhythm with the house. I slipped out of bed, heart hammering. The motion light by the garage flicked on, casting a sharp beam across the driveway. For a second I saw movement, a shadow darting along the hedge line. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The air was cool, the kind of silence that hums with electricity. I swept the light across the yard. Nothing. Then I saw it. On the hood of my car, a single white envelope. No name. Inside was a photo. It was my house, taken from across the street. The shot was framed perfectly, angled to include the front door, the porch, and the exact spot where I was standing now. No note. No signature. Just proof that she, or someone, had been watching me again. This time, I called the police immediately. They arrived 20 minutes later, but by then, Whoever had left the photo was long gone. The officer filed another report, promised to increase patrols. It sounded more like a courtesy than a plan. For the next few weeks, nothing happened. No packages, no photos, no strange noises. The tension faded just enough for me to start sleeping again. Until the night the power went out. It was just after 11. I was watching TV when everything went black. Lights, hums, everything. The silence was sudden, heavy. I waited for the neighborhood to flicker back online, but the street lights stayed dark. Just my house. A power outage, isolated. I went outside with my flashlight. The air was still, almost too still. My neighbors' lights were on. Their air conditioners running. Only my circuit was dead. I circled around to the side panel and found the main breaker flipped off. Deliberately. Someone had been there. I turned it back on. The porch lights blinked alive. My security system rebooted. I checked the feed. One camera was dead. The one aimed at the breaker box. The next morning, I found something new, glitter. Just a faint shimmer of gold dust on the gravel near the side gate. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. I did. It wasn't fear I felt then. It was a kind of grim respect. She'd outlasted humiliation, police, even fire. Now she was rewriting her legacy. Not as the villain of the story, but as the ghost haunting mine. That night, I packed a small bag, just in case. Documents, flash drive, camera backups. If she wanted a psychological war, she'd picked the wrong opponent. 2 days later, I got another letter. This time, type. You think you won, it said. You think you buried me under glitter and gossip. But you don't understand. You're the one who can't stop watching. I read it 3 times. She wasn't entirely wrong. Every camera angle, every motion alert, I'd built my world around seeing her coming. Maybe that's what she wanted all along. To live rent-free in my vigilance. I almost threw the letter away. But something about that line, "You're the one who can't stop watching," stuck with me. So I decided to do something radical. I turned off all the cameras. Every last one. For the first time in 2 years, my house was blind. The first night was unbearable. Every sound felt amplified. I woke up 3 times convinced someone was outside. The second night was worse. But by the third, something shifted. The paranoia started to fade. The silence started to sound like peace again. Weeks passed. No new packages. No photos. No glitter. One afternoon, I was mowing the lawn when a moving truck pulled up next door. A young couple stepped out, new owners, finally. Fresh faces, wide smiles, no idea what had happened on this street. They waved. I waved back. The woman smiled. You're the one who used to live next to that HOA lady, right? The one from the news. Yeah, I said. That was a while ago. She laughed. People said she was crazy. Guess every neighborhood has one. Guess so. That night, I stood on my porch, watching the sun dip below the rooftop. For the first time in a long while, I felt calm. The drill still sat on a shelf in my garage. A relic, a reminder, maybe even a trophy. As I turned to go inside, I noticed something glinting near the new couple's mailbox. A speck of gold. Just one. I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just dust catching the light. Or maybe Karen had finally found a new audience. Either way, I closed my door, locked it, and didn't look back. Because some wars don't end, they just change houses.